Hi guys, welcome to Primus Learning. It's Aziz here today, and we are going to be discussing about AWS IAM. In the previous lecture, we discussed about how to create an AWS account. We have also seen the AWS global infrastructure and introduction to cloud computing. So let's go ahead and look at how we can be able to define who can have access to our AWS account and what they can be able to do in our AWS account. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So before moving from the on-premises infrastructure into the cloud, we were able to ensure authentication and authorization by using badges. So every employee, when they're going to the office in the morning, they need to present a badge, and then before they'll be able to get into the office. And now, once you get into the office space, you're going to be able to get into each and every other office by also scanning this badge, which is now going to detect if you have the level of authorization to be able to access the particular space that you're trying to access. So AWS Identity and Access Management is all about authentication and authorization. AWS IAM is going to authenticate you, which means AWS IAM is going to check if you are who you are claiming that you are by validating that your username and the password that you're providing actually does exist and is in that particular account. And then the authorization, meaning that when you have successfully logged in, AWS IAM is going to verify what type of access level do you have. AWS IAM is based on identities. AWS IAM has different types of identities. We have user identities, we have groups, and then we have IAM roles. An IAM user is basically a human identity, like you and I, that we are going to create an account for by providing the user's name and then the level of access that the user should be able to have in our account. Then when we have multiple users, we can be able to group our users into various groups for easy management. We also have IAM roles, and these are in non-human identities that we are going to be able to use with AWS IAM for some other AWS services to communicate with some AWS services. Now, after you have these identities, how are you going to be able to define what type of access each identity is going to have? Is by using what we call an IAM policy. An IAM policy is simply just a JSON document that contains the effects of what you want to do. It has the action, then it has the resources, and then it can also have a condition. When working with AWS IAM, we need to ensure that we are using AWS IAM best practices. First, we need to ensure that all the users enable multi-factor authentication, also called MFA. What is multi-factor authentication? Multi-factor authentication is just another extra layer of authentication where we're going to use a third-party authenticator app like Microsoft Authenticator or Google Authenticator, and then we are going to link this app to our AWS account, and whenever a user is logging into their AWS account, then they are going to be required to provide an MFA token that they're going to get from the Authenticator app, and then they'll be able to finish with the login process. We also need to ensure that we are managing the root credentials very well. The root credentials are the initial credentials that we used to create the AWS account, which is the email and the password. These credentials are very, very important because if someone else gets a hold of them, then they are able to do anything that they want in our AWS account. We also need to ensure that we are using the AWS IAM principle of least privilege, which basically means in our IAM policies, we are going to be giving our users access to just what they need. So we are not going to be over-giving permissions, and we are not going to be under-giving permissions. With AWS IAM, you can also make use of what we call the AWS IAM Access Analyzer, which is going to show us the activity of the user and the various resources they have been accessing very, very often. And then based on this, we can be able to reduce the privileges that we give to the user initially. We can also use an AWS IAM password policy. So the IAM administrator can define a password policy that can say, for example, we are going to need at least 8 characters, and we are going to need at least an uppercase character, at least a number, and at least a special character. So by doing this, we're able to enforce strong password policies in our AWS environment. That will be all for today about AWS IAM. And in the next lecture, we are going to see the hands-on on how to work with AWS IAM. Thank you very much. Bye.